Have you ever wondered why some medications only seem to work when they're injected?
Yeah,
But if you swallow them, they do absolutely nothing.
that's a great question.
It's all about biopharmaceutics.
Really the science behind how a drug moves through the body
Yeah,
and how that journey impacts its effect.
exactly.
Yeah.
So today we're going to be doing a deep dive into biopharmaceutics and pharmacokinetics.
We're going to try to understand this fascinating process.
We're going to uncover what these terms even mean
Why do they matter?
and how scientists use these models to try and predict drug behavior.
I think you'll be surprised to learn just how complex this whole process is.
Get ready for some aha moments about those medications that you take.
It's fascinating because we often think about a drug as just like a simple chemical with a very specific action.
Right.
But the journey that that chemical takes through the body is like a complex odyssey.
Oh yeah, it's definitely not as easy as just popping a pill and waiting for the magic to happen.
Absolutely not.
There's a whole world of factors at play.
So many things going on.
So let's start with some basics. What is drug product performance?
Yeah, how does biopharmaceutics fit in?
Yeah.
So drug product performance is all about how well the drug delivers its active ingredient
Okay.
to the right place in the body
Okay.
to actually have the desired effect. And biopharmaceutics is really this study of all the different factors that influence that performance.
Okay.
It's like the science of getting the drug to its destination
Okay.
in the right amount.
So making sure that the drug actually gets to where it needs to be
Right.
to actually do its job.
To do its job.
Now, the excerpt actually mentioned isoproterenol,
Oh, yeah.
and this drug can increase heart rate.
That's right.
And when it's injected, it works great.
Perfectly.
But when it's taken orally at the same dose,
Same dose.
nothing happens.
It just doesn't work.
It's pretty wild.
That's a really great example. It illustrates the point of why biopharmaceutics is so important.
Okay.
The route that the drug is given
Okay.
really impacts the availability of that drug.
Yep.
So when you think about a tablet, it has to go through a lot.
Right.
It has to survive the stomach, which is a very harsh environment.
Yeah.
It has to dissolve properly.
Yeah.
And then it has to be absorbed through the gut. Injection bypasses all those hurdles.
Totally.
It goes straight into the bloodstream,
Interesting.
delivers the drug right where it needs to go.
So it's like taking the scenic route versus the direct flight.
Right.
It's the same destination,
Totally.
but a very different journey.
And that can really determine whether the drug works or not.
This is making me wonder,
Yeah.
once a drug is absorbed, where does it go in the body?
Where does it go and how does it eventually leave?
Yeah, how does it leave?
Well, that's where pharmacokinetics comes in.
Okay.
It's the study of how the body handles a drug. It encompasses absorption, distribution,
Okay.
metabolism, and excretion.
Okay.
So the drug's entire journey from entry to exit.
That's a lot. And I always remember back in school
Yeah.
thinking that this is very complex.
It's complicated for sure.
So are there any like real world implications of this?
Yeah. I mean, does it actually affect?
Does it affect how people respond to different medicines?
Absolutely. It does. Two different people can take the same dose of a medication,
Okay.
but their bodies can handle that drug totally differently based on their individual pharmacokinetics.
Okay.
That's why that same dose can be effective for one person but completely useless for another.
Interesting.
Or even worse, it can cause side effects in another
Wow.
because the way their body is handling the drug is different.
So even with the same drug
Same drug,
and the same dosage,
same dosage.
our bodies can react totally differently.
They're very differently.
And that's why I see that personalized medicine is becoming so important.
Yeah, it really is.
It's tailoring the treatment
Tailoring it.
to the way people metabolize drugs.
Right, and you're not just looking at an average person.
Right.
You're looking at how that drug is going to move through that specific individual's body.
Okay, so now let's say that the drug has successfully navigated this journey
Okay.
and has reached its target.
Its destination.
What does it actually do at the cellular level?
Yeah, how does it actually work there?
Yeah.
Well, that's the realm of pharmacodynamics.
Okay.
Pharmacodynamics focuses on what the drug does to the body.
Okay.
So its mechanism of action,
Yeah.
the effects that we observe,
Yeah.
and the relationship between the concentration of that drug and those effects.
I like to think of it as like a lock and key,
Oh, that's good.
the drug being the key.
Okay.
It needs to find the right lock or receptor
The right receptor
to actually unlock its effect.
to get the effect.
Does that make sense?
That's a perfect analogy.
Okay.
And just like you might need a bunch of keys
Yeah.
to open a bunch of locks,
Yeah.
the concentration of the drug often influences how strong the effect is.
Right.
But there's a catch. Because sometimes side effects
Oh, though.
can also start appearing as you increase the dose. So it's a delicate balancing act.
So if the drug is the key,
Drug is the key.
and more keys mean a stronger effect,
Yep.
how do doctors figure out
Right.
the right number of keys
That's the question.
for each patient
Yeah.
or the right dose?
Yeah.
How is this personalized?
Well, that's where clinical pharmacokinetics comes in.
Okay.
It uses the principles of pharmacokinetics
Mhm.
to try to tailor the drug therapy for that individual.
Okay.
And for certain medications, especially those that have a narrow therapeutic window,
Okay.
doctors will use something called therapeutic drug monitoring,
Okay.
TDM.
No, therapeutic window.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, a therapeutic window is a range of drug concentrations in the blood
Okay.
that produce the desired effect without causing harm.
The
So if you have too little of a drug, it's not going to be effective.
Right.
If you have too much of a drug, it could be toxic.
Right.
So you're looking for that sweet spot,
The sweet spot.
the therapeutic window.
So with a narrow therapeutic window,
It's narrow.
like walking a tightrope,
That's a great analogy.
you need the right amount
You need the right amount
to stay balanced and safe.
to be effective, but also safe.
Right. Are there any like common examples of drugs that require this type of monitoring?
Absolutely. So theophylline, which is used for asthma,
Okay.
and warfarin, which is a blood thinner.
Okay.
Those are two classic examples where TDM is absolutely crucial.
So the doctors will.
They regularly measure the blood levels
Okay.
to make sure that the patient stays within that therapeutic window.
That's incredible.
It's all about fine-tuning the treatment based on how the individual is responding.
Wow. That's amazing. It's like personalized medicine in action.
It really is.
I remember feeling so overwhelmed back in the day by all the information
Oh, yeah.
on the drug labels.
These are FDA-approved drug labels.
Is there a good way
They're long.
to navigate all that information?
They can be daunting, but they do have a lot of great information.
Okay.
Think of it as like a really well-organized handbook. The first thing you should look at is the highlights of prescribing information,
Okay.
which is a concise summary
Oh, the key points.
of the most important things, including any potential serious risks.
Got it.
Then you can go into the full prescribing information,
Okay.
which gives you all the details on dosage, side effects, drug interactions, and more.
And there's also,
And then there's a section called clinical pharmacology.
which explains how the drug works.
That's right.
The pharmacokinetics.
The pharmacokinetic properties and any special considerations.
Great tip.
It's like having a roadmap. They
Yeah.
help you navigate through all those details.
Now, speaking of individual variation, how do our genes play a role
Oh, that's interesting.
in how we respond to drugs?
Well, that's where pharmacogenetics comes in,
Okay.
which is the study of how variations in our genes affect our responses to medications.
Okay.
So remember those receptors that we were talking about earlier?
Yeah.
The locks and keys?
Yeah.
Genetic differences can slightly alter those locks, making them more or less receptive to that drug key.
So it's like having a slightly different keyhole
Different keyhole
for the same key.
for the same key. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Sometimes it jams.
Sometimes it jams.
Are there any real-world examples
Ooh, yeah.
of how these genetic variations can impact these drug responses?
Yeah, there's some really fascinating cases like codeine,
Okay.
which is
That's
used
more.
often for pain relief.
Yeah.
It's actually a prodrug, which means that it needs to be metabolized by the body
Okay.
into morphine to become active.
Right.
But some people have a genetic variation in the CYP2D6 enzyme,
Okay.
which is responsible for that conversion.
Interesting. So the codeine key needs that enzyme
Needs the enzyme.
to transform it into the morphine key.
Yeah.
So what happens if somebody has a variation?
If the enzyme isn't functioning properly
Yeah.
because of a genetic variation, the codeine can't be converted to morphine.
So it's useless.
It's essentially useless for pain relief.
Wow.
On the flip side, some people have extra copies of this gene. Oh. And they metabolize codeine very rapidly.
Okay.
So they might have much stronger effects
Okay.
and an increased risk of side effects.
Wow. So just a slight tweak
Just a little tweak
in our genetic code.
can completely change how our bodies handle a drug.
Wow. This really highlights the importance
It does.
of understanding these individual variations.
Absolutely.
So we've got the drug itself.
Yep.
The journey through the body,
The journey.
how our genes influence its effects.
Right.
How do we bring this all together
How do we see the big picture?
to understand how a drug is working?
Yeah, well, that's where drug exposure and drug response come in.
Okay.
Drug exposure refers to how much drug is present in the body over time,
Okay.
considering factors like dose,
Okay.
how it's absorbed, and how it's eliminated.
Okay.
Drug response is the actual effect,
Okay.
whether it's a subtle change in a biomarker or a noticeable improvement in symptoms.
So exposure is about the drug's presence,
That's right.
and response is about its impact.
Its impact.
Is there always a link between the two?
Well,
Does more drug always mean a greater effect?
it's not always a simple linear relationship.
Okay.
While the concentration of a drug often influences the intensity of its effect,
Okay.
other factors come into play as well,
Yeah.
like the sensitivity of those target receptors,
Right.
which can vary,
Okay.
affecting how strongly the drug binds and exerts its effect, even at the same concentration.
So even if the drug key is present,
It is.
the lock itself might be a little bit finicky,
It might.
affecting how well it works.
Exactly.
It seems like there's always
Always another layer.
another layer of complexity.
Another layer to uncover.
So what happens when things go wrong?
Oh, like when somebody accidentally takes too much medication.
Right. Like what are the consequences of exceeding that therapeutic window?
Right, exceeding that sweet spot.
Yeah.
Well, that's where toxicokinetics and clinical toxicology come in.
Okay.
Toxicokinetics studies what happens when the body's exposed to too much drug. It looks at how high doses can overwhelm those normal drug handling processes.
So it's like pushing a system beyond its limits
Apiceding its acastic.
to handle things smoothly.
Right.
And clinical toxicology investigates the harmful effects of drugs and poisons
Okay.
and helps us to understand how to treat overdoses and poisoning.
So that's a crucial area of study
Very crucial.
because accidental or intentional overdosing
Yes.
can have very serious consequences.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of understanding drug behavior,
Okay.
how do scientists actually measure
How do they measure?
the drug concentration in the body?
Yeah.
Is it as simple as just a blood test?
Well, it can be,
Okay.
but sometimes more sophisticated techniques are needed.
Like what?
Things like chromatography
Okay.
and mass spectrometry.
And these can measure tiny amounts of drug
Tiny, tiny amounts.
in really complex biological samples
Like blood or urine.
with incredible accuracy.
Incredible accuracy.
It's like having a microscopic view.
Of what's happening at the molecular level.
Yeah.
Can you give us a quick overview
Yeah.
of how these techniques work?
So imagine you have a mixed bag of colorful candies.
Okay.
Chromatography is like a sorting machine.
Okay.
Separates the candies based on their properties like color or size.
Okay.
In drug analysis, we use chromatography to separate the drug from other components in a biological sample.
So it isolates the drug from all the other noise.
Exactly. It isolates it.
What about mass spectrometry?
So once we've separated the drug,
Okay.
mass spectrometry comes in to identify and quantify it.
Okay.
It measures the mass to charge ratio of molecules,
Okay.
like a fingerprint
The fingerprint.
of the drug molecule,
Okay.
to confirm its identity and measure its abundance.
So chromatography separates.
Okay.
And mass spectrometry identifies and measures.
Identifies and quantifies.
That's amazing. But even with these techniques,
even with them.
is there anything else that we need to consider when we're interpreting these concentrations in the body?
You're thinking about bound and unbound drug
Yeah.
because not all of the drug that's present in the blood is necessarily active.
Oh, really?
Some drugs bind to proteins in the blood,
Right.
like hitching a ride on a bus.
Okay.
And only the unbound drug is actually available to interact with its target and produce its effect.
So it's like having a crowd of people,
That's right.
but only some are actually participating in the event.
That's right.
The total number might be misleading
It can be.
if we don't consider who's actually doing something.
Absolutely.
So how do we determine that?
Well, some methods measure the total drug concentration.
Okay.
Other methods specifically measure the unbound fraction.
Okay.
So you have to know what you're dealing with
Okay.
in order to interpret the results accurately.
It's yet another layer of complexity
It is.
in this intricate dance between drugs and our bodies.
There's a lot going on.
Knowing how much drug is present
Yeah.
is only one part of the story.
It's only part of it.
We also need to know how much is available to do the job.
How much is active?
That highlights the importance of having the right tools and the right knowledge
To make sense of it all.
to make sense of all this data.
Absolutely.
This has been a lot of information.
And this leads us to the world of pharmacokinetic models.
which we'll talk about next time.
We'll talk about those next time.
Okay.
Those are mathematical representations
Huh.
that can help us make sense of all this data.
So we're going to enter the matrix
The matrix
of drug behavior,
drug behavior.
where math and biology collide.
Absolutely.
I can't wait.
It's going to be fun.
I'm eager to see how these models can actually help us untangle this complexity
The complexity.
of drug action and personalized treatment.
Stay tuned
We'll continue this deep dive
into biopharmaceutics and pharmacokinetics.
in part 2 of this discussion.
We'll see you then.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of biopharmaceutics and pharmacokinetics.
It's amazing how much we've already learned
It really is.
about the complexities of drug action, but
Yeah.
we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah, it's not just about the drug molecule itself.
Right.
It's about the whole formulation
It's the whole package.
and how that impacts the performance
Absolutely
of the
right.
drug.
Drug product performance is key.
It really is. And it's like the difference between
Yeah.
having a really talented musician and having a whole orchestra.
Oh, I like that.
You know, a soloist can be impressive,
Can be.
but that full symphony
Yeah.
creates a much richer experience,
That's a great analogy.
doesn't it?
The active ingredient is our soloist,
Yeah.
and then all the other ingredients, the excipients, are like the supporting cast.
Okay.
They can dramatically affect how that drug is released and absorbed.
So those seemingly inactive ingredients
Yeah.
can actually make or break the drug's performance.
They can.
What are some of the key factors
Yeah.
that scientists actually consider when designing a drug product
Okay.
with these biopharmaceutical principles in mind?
So first and foremost, the therapeutic objective.
Okay.
What's the goal?
Right.
Are you trying to achieve rapid relief from symptoms,
Okay.
like with a pain reliever?
Yeah.
Or sustained action over a longer period,
Right.
like with a high blood pressure medication?
Okay, so the formulation needs to be
It needs to be tailored
to match that goal.
to the treatment goal.
Yes.
Got it. What else plays a role?
Well, the properties of the drug itself are crucial.
Okay.
Its solubility, its particle size,
Yeah.
even the presence of impurities.
Interesting.
All these things can affect how well the drug is absorbed
Okay.
and how stable it is within the formulation.
It's so fascinating how something as tiny as particle size
It's
can have a huge impact.
it can.
What other things are there to consider?
Well, the dosage regimen is another key aspect.
Okay.
How much drug is given,
Yeah.
how often it's taken,
Yeah.
and how acceptable it is to the patient.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if the medication tastes terrible,
Or it has a complicated schedule. People might not take it as prescribed.
totally. I've definitely struggled
It happens.
with medication schedules
Right.
in the past, and sometimes,
A simple change.
like a weekly pill organizer
Yeah.
can help people stay on track.
Absolutely. Little things like that can make a huge difference.
Wow.
And of course, the route of administration plays a major role.
Okay.
Oral, topical, intravenous inhalation, each of these routes presents its own unique opportunities and challenges.
It's like choosing the best way to get,
The best mode of transportation.
to your destination.
Yeah.
The drug to its destination.
And you're right, the choice of excipients is like casting those supporting roles.
Yes.
In our drug symphony, they're not the star,
Right.
but they can make or break the performance.
They can enhance it.
They enhance it for sure.
So tell me,
Yeah.
what about the manufacturing process itself?
Yeah.
Does that influence drug product performance as well?
Absolutely. The accuracy of weighing the ingredients, the uniformity of blending,
Yeah.
the sterility of parenteral products. So those are the ones that are given by injection.
Okay.
All these things are critical for ensuring the quality of the product.
It's like baking a cake.
It is.
You have to measure the ingredients
Right.
and bake it at the right temperature,
You got it.
or it'll be a disaster.
It's both an art and a science.
So it's not just about the science behind the drug.
Right.
It's about the art of manufacturing it.
The art of manufacturing it consistently and reliably.
And pharmaceutical manufacturers have to follow
Strict standards
strict standards,
and regulations.
regulations to make sure that their products
Safe and effective.
are safe and effective.
That's right.
It sounds like creating a drug product
It's a team effort.
is a massive team effort.
It involves scientists, engineers, pharmacists, and many others.
Wow. So it's not a set it and forget it
It's not.
kind of situation.
Right. It's dynamic.
Our understanding of the drug and its performance
It's always evolving.
is constantly evolving. This reminds me.
Yeah.
The textbook actually mentioned
Yeah.
the FDA's redesign
Yes.
of the prescribing information format.
Of the package insert.
What was the purpose of that?
The goal was to make the information more user-friendly
Okay.
for healthcare practitioners
Oh,
so they can easily access the information when they're making treatment decisions.
So it's like an intuitive manual.
Exactly, like a well-designed manual.
For healthcare professionals, what changes did they make?
They reorganized the content into 3 key sections.
Okay.
The highlights,
Okay.
which provide a concise overview of the most important information, including those boxed warnings about serious risks.
Right.
Then the table of contents,
Oh, okay.
which helps you navigate the document.
Mm-hmm.
And then the full prescribing information, which contains all the detailed information needed for safe and effective use.
Got it. So it's like they have a hierarchy of information. You got the key points up front, and then it gets more detailed as you go deeper.
Exactly as you need it.
And all this is publicly available
It is.
on the FDA's website.
Drugs at FDA.
That's good to know.
Great resource.
One section that I saw on the table of contents
Yeah.
was the clinical pharmacology section.
Yeah. What kind of information does that cover?
Yeah.
That section really gets into the nitty-gritty
Okay.
of how the drug works on a molecular level,
Okay.
its pharmacokinetic properties,
Mm.
and any special considerations for its use.
It's like a behind-the-scenes look
behind the scenes.
at the medication.
Absolutely.
That's amazing how much information
It's a lot of information.
just packed into these labels.
It's a comprehensive guide
Yeah.
to the drug and how it works.
And it's important to remember that the prescribing information
Yeah,
represents the current understanding
that's right.
of that drug.
Current as of that date.
As new research emerges,
Yeah.
the label might be updated.
It could be
It's a living document
a living document,
that's constantly evolving.
evolving with our scientific understanding.
Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about
Sure.
pharmacogenetics again.
Okay.
I'm so fascinated by this.
Interesting. Great.
Interplay between genes
Yeah.
and drugs.
The interplay between the two.
It's a rapidly evolving field.
It is.
Huge implications for personalized medicine.
As we've been talking about, pharmacogenetics explores how these variations can influence how a person responds
Okay.
to a medication.
Okay.
So some people might metabolize a drug really quickly
Right.
due to genetic differences,
Right.
while others might be really sensitive to its effects.
It's like having different instruction manuals
It is.
for how to process the drug.
That's a good way to think about it.
And this is where the vision of the right drug
Right. For the
Make-
right patient
at the right dose
at the right dose.
starts to become a reality.
That's the goal.
That's amazing. And as we learn more about the genes
Absolutely.
that influence these drug responses,
Yeah. As we learn more, we can create even more targeted, more effective therapies.
this has been so eye-opening.
Hasn't it?
I'm seeing this interplay between chemistry, biology, and genetics
All working together.
in a whole new light.
It's amazing.
It's clear we're still learning so much about how drugs
So much more to learn.
work in the body.
Yeah, we are. And as we uncover more of these intricacies, we'll be able to create safer, more effective, and truly personalized therapies.
That's very exciting.
It is.
But before we get too far ahead,
Okay.
I'd love to circle back to something
Yeah.
we touched on earlier.
Okay.
How scientists measure drug concentrations.
Oh, yeah. How do they actually measure it?
Yeah.
Well, measuring drug concentrations is super important for understanding how a drug is behaving
Okay.
and for making sure that the patient's getting the right dose.
This is like taking a snapshot
Snapshot.
of what's happening inside the body.
That's a good way to put it.
What are the key considerations in this process?
So first, you got to choose the right biological sample. Blood plasma serum are often used
Okay.
because they reflect the drug levels throughout the body.
Okay.
Urine can be used to see how much drug has been eliminated.
Okay.
Saliva might be used to look at the free, unbound drug.
Okay, so the choice of sample depends
It does
that's-
on what information
on what you're looking for.
you're trying to gather.
Are you interested in how much drug is circulating or how much has been eliminated or how much is actually active?
It's like choosing the right lens
Right,
for a camera
for the camera.
to capture those specific details.
Specific detail.
What are some of the go-to techniques?
The workhorses
Yeah.
for this type of analysis. Chromatography and mass spectrometry.
I've heard of those before.
Those are the dynamic duo.
But can you break them down for us?
Absolutely. So chromatography is a separation technique.
Okay.
Imagine we have that bag of colorful candies again.
Okay.
Chromatography lets us separate those candies based on their properties.
Okay.
In drug analysis, we use it to separate the drug from everything else in the sample. So it's isolating the signal from the noise.
Isolating the signal.
And what about mass spectrometry?
Once we've isolated the drug,
Okay.
mass spectrometry comes in to identify and quantify it.
Okay.
So it measures the mass to charge ratio of molecules.
Okay.
We can confirm the drug's identity
Okay.
and measure how much is there.
So it's like taking a fingerprint
A fingerprint
of the drug molecule.
of the molecule.
It's incredible how technology
It is.
helping us unravel the mysteries of drug behavior.
And it's getting better all the time.
But even with these sophisticated tools,
yeah,
it gets a little complicated, right?
it does.
Especially when we consider bound and unbound drugs.
Oh, yeah. Remember when a drug binds to a protein, it's temporarily inactive?
Mhm.
Only the free drug
Okay.
can interact with its target and produce its effect.
So knowing the total drug concentration might not give us the full picture.
Right. We need to know how much is actually free to do its job.
Exactly. And this is where our analytical techniques
They become critical.
become even more important.
They do.
Some measure the total concentration.
Oh,
Others measure the unbound fraction.
that's right.
And we have to know which one we're dealing with
You have to know what you're looking at.
to interpret the results and make good decisions.
About treatment.
It's like knowing if a crowd is mostly spectators or actual players on the field.
Oh, that's good.
Right.
That's a great way to think about it.
The total number might be misleading
It might.
if we don't know who's actually doing something.
That's right.
So depending on the drug
Right.
and the situation,
Clinical situation.
we might need to focus
We might.
on either the total concentration
Or the unbound.
or the unbound to make the best decisions.
This just adds another layer.
Another layer
Very
of complexity to the intricate dance between drugs and our bodies.
Right. It's incredible how much we have to consider.
It's a lot.
Right.
And the more we learn, the more we realize we don't know.
Wow.
Pharmacokinetics is a fascinating field.
But there's a lot we're still figuring out.
This has been amazing.
It's been fun.
I'm feeling so much more knowledgeable
Good.
about how drugs actually work in the body.
I'm glad to hear that.
We've covered a lot of ground today,
We have.
from the performance and the manufacturing all the way to
Cream.
measuring the concentrations and bound and unbound drug.
And this brings us back to that question we posed at the beginning
Okay.
about the future of medicine.
Okay.
What does all this mean for the future?
It's a great question.
To ponder as we head into the final part of our deep dive,
Okay.
we're going to be talking about pharmacokinetic models,
I can't wait.
the tools that can help us predict drug behavior and bring us closer to personalized medicine.
Stay tuned. We'll continue this discussion in part 3. Welcome back. We've been on quite a journey
I know we have.
exploring this world of how drugs interact with our bodies.
The human body is a fascinating thing.
It is.
And as we move towards personalized medicine,
Yeah.
understanding these concepts becomes even more critical.
Right. And we ended the last part talking about the future of medicine
Yeah,
and the role of these pharmacokinetic models.
those models.
They sound like really powerful tools for predicting
There.
how a drug's going to behave in the body.
For predicting drug behavior.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I'm ready to dive deeper
Okay, let's do it.
into these models.
Mm-hmm.
What are some specific ways that they're being used today?
Well, one of the most important is predicting drug levels in the body
Okay.
by simulating how a drug is absorbed and distributed, metabolized, and eliminated.
Yeah.
These models can help determine the right dose to give
Okay.
to achieve that desired effect without causing toxicity.
So it's like having a virtual laboratory
Yeah,
where you can test out different scenarios
right.
before actually giving the drug to a patient.
Before you give it to a real person,
Wow.
you can test it out in the computer first.
And these models can help us optimize treatment
They can.
for individuals, right?
Sure, individuals.
Taking into account
All those factors.
all those factors.
Age, weight, kidney, liver function, interactions with other medications.
So we're getting closer and closer to
Personalized medicine.
that personalized medicine.
It's the future.
Yeah, and beyond predicting drug levels,
Yeah.
can these models help us understand how changes in physiology
Yeah,
or disease might impact a drug's journey through the body?
absolutely.
So, for example, how a drug might behave differently
Right.
in someone with liver disease.
Exactly. Someone who might not be able to metabolize medications as well as somebody else.
And that would allow doctors to adjust
They could adjust the dose or maybe even choose a different medication
to make sure.
to get the best outcome.
What about drug interactions?
Oh, that's a big one.
That's a huge concern, especially for people
Especially for people taking multiple medications.
on multiple meds.
Yeah,
Can these models help us manage all that?
absolutely.
That
They
would
can
be-
simulate how different drugs might interact with each other, affecting their absorption, distribution, metabolism, or excretion.
Okay.
So you can predict and hopefully prevent potentially harmful drug interactions.
So it's like running an experiment
It
to
is
see how all these different chemicals react.
like a virtual experiment.
Yeah. A virtual experiment.
before you mix them in the real world.
Before mixing them in a test tube.
Exactly.
All right. And it highlights the importance of patient safety.
Big time.
Yeah. So can you remind us
Sure.
about the two main types of models?
Compartmental and physiologic.
Yes, compartmental and physiologic models.
Mm-hmm.
What are the key differences?
So compartmental models simplify the body
Okay.
into a series of interconnected compartments. And they don't necessarily correspond to a specific organ. They just represent groups of tissues that handle the drug in similar ways.
So it's simplifying the complex reality
Purifying it.
of the body into something.
Easier to work with.
That's easier to work with.
Exactly.
Got it. What about those physiologic models?
Physiologic models are a bit more complex.
Okay.
They actually incorporate data like organ sizes, blood flow rates, and drug affinities for different tissues.
Okay.
So they're based on a more realistic picture of the body.
So a more realistic picture versus a simplified representation.
Right, and that allows them to make more precise predictions about drug concentrations in specific organs.
I see how that would be very helpful.
Especially if you're dealing with targeted therapies.
Yes, like cancer treatments.
Exactly.
But I imagine there are situations where the simpler compartmental model might be sufficient.
There are. Absolutely.
It just depends
It depends on the situation.
on the situation.
What question are you trying to answer?
What question are you trying to answer?
What problem are you trying to solve?
Now, the textbook mentioned non-compartmental analysis.
Oh, yeah.
What is that?
So that's a way to analyze the data
Right.
without making assumptions about specific compartments in the body.
Okay.
It's a more data-driven approach.
Okay.
You let the measurements themselves guide the analysis.
So instead of fitting the data into a model,
Right.
we're letting the data tell the story.
Exactly.
When would this be helpful?
Well, it can be really useful when you have limited data
Okay.
or when the drug's behavior is very complex
Okay.
and it doesn't fit neatly into that compartmental model.
So it allows us to get information.
To extract meaningful information,
When the picture isn't perfectly clear.
even when it's messy.
Wow. So this highlights a key theme, I think,
A key theme
that we've talked about.
throughout our deep dive.
The importance of flexibility and adaptability
Adaptability.
and pharmacokinetics.
The body is complex.
The body is very complex.
And drug behavior can be influenced by so many things.
A multitude of factors.
We need tools that can handle that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's a good reminder that we're always learning and there's always more to discover.
Always more to learn.
As we continue to learn more about biopharmaceutics and pharmacokinetics,
Right.
we're opening up all these new possibilities.
For personalized, targeted, and more effective therapies.
This has been such a great learning experience.
I agree.
We've gone from the basics of absorption and elimination
We've covered a lot.
all the way to these complex mathematical models
It's been a journey.
and these sophisticated analytical techniques.
All connected to improving patient care.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm leaving this conversation
Yeah.
with a much deeper appreciation for the intricacies of drug action
I'm glad to hear that.
and all the incredible science that goes into developing
Safe and effective medications.
safe and effective medications.
It's amazing what they're doing these days.
And to our listeners, we encourage you to keep learning about this.
Absolutely. There's so much to explore
This interplay,
between drugs and the human body.
it's been such a pleasure
The pleasure was all mine.
diving deep into this topic with you.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for sharing your expertise.
You're welcome.